You're listening to Bloomberg Businessweek with Massar and Tim Stenovec on Bloomberg Radio.
Envoys representing more than 190 nations. They're going to be gathering for COP28, the UN's annual climate change conference. Bailey, it's held in Dubai later this week. You know, with everything going on, we can't forget that world leaders have made commitments when it comes to climate change.
Yeah, no, it's definitely interesting. And I don't know if you saw the big take about China's remote deserts hiding an energy revolution.
I did see that.
Ahead of COP28. So definitely top of mind as always, but even more so given the week ahead.
Yeah, and think about the year that we've had,
Yeah.
right, in terms of the hottest on record in terms of the climate. So let's get to it, because someone who will be there, we know that the world's two largest polluters, the heads of those nations, we're talking about President Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping, they will not be there. But our next guest will be there. Katie McGinty is VP and Chief Sustainability Officer at Johnson Controls. They make building HVAC systems, building management and fire detection systems, security solutions, and a lot more. She joins us on Zoom from Milwaukee. Katie, how are you?
Doing terrific. How are you today?
Doing well. It's kind of a quiet day after what's been a chaotic year, to say the least. First of all, I know you're headed to Dubai, but tell us, what do you think the significance is of Presidents Biden and Xi not being there? We know the two have held some talks recently to step up joint action when it comes to climate change. So that's the good news. But their physical presence not being there, what's your view on that?
Well, look, ideally they would all be there because this is a critically important issue at a very sensitive and important time. However, I know they will be well represented, and there is, I think, significant momentum in the direction of progress on important dimensions of the climate issue that both can tackle the problem as well as open up new opportunities.
Well, Katie, decisions, right, correct me if I'm wrong, they have to be unanimous. So how does that play into what we're going to hear and see from COP28?
Yeah, it's an excellent point. And when you think of 190 countries coming together and reaching agreement on issues that go to the heart of their economies, it is remarkable how much progress has been made. And I think as we look at the issues that are top of the agenda, tripling renewable energy, doubling energy efficiency, those are policy priorities that can drive common ground because they hit a trifecta. They help the environment, but they also grow economies and provide good homegrown new jobs. So I think that's a recipe to enable progress to accelerate at this conference of the parties.
Well, we've definitely seen here in the United States the commitment, the investment, through legislation to help when it comes to renewable energies. And that's certainly a significant way. What I do wonder about is that governments are increasingly around the world, the U.S. included, Katie, that their budget deficits are growing. And I do wonder what's going to be cut going forward. So how are you thinking about that and the impact it could have on progress when it comes to climate moves?
Well, I do think that those policies that send a market signal that the investment direction is in a climate-friendly way are incredibly important. They're coupled, though, by a business imperative that in buildings, for example, as you noted, Johnson Controls is a 140-year young sustainable building technology company. And, we are all about both cutting carbon in buildings as well as giving a favor to the bottom line. So, buildings are 40% almost of global greenhouse gas emissions, and that's just a lot of waste. When we get in there and electrify those operations and put a digital platform so you can have data, put data to work, we're seeing buildings where we're cutting their carbon by 70+% while saving them more than 60% in their electric bills. So that is a recipe to enable us to both get on and accelerate action as we have to do on climate while lifting economies and accelerating growth.
Well, Katie, how easy is it to deploy those technologies, and kind of what regions of the world are actually set up to have things like that deployed and utilized in their buildings?
Yeah, it's a great question because people think, well, maybe it's just for brand new and state-of-the-art buildings. But it's not just the case, or maybe it's just for buildings that are in the sunniest parts of the planet where you can use solar energy. We have worked both on the one end of the spectrum with public housing authorities, community colleges, where every dollar is precious, and we can knock 20, 30, 40% off the energy bills there and an equal amount of carbon, so that the carbon footprint, you're doing right by the planet while you're doing right by your pocketbook. We have buildings that are way north of the Arctic Circle that not only are net zero buildings, they actually generate more electricity than they consume, and they give the rest of it back to the surrounding communities through what's called district energy loops. So these technologies work in every building, and for every building there is the opportunity to make the people who live, work, and play in those buildings healthier, more productive, more engaged, while you are also dialing down that energy bill and dialing up doing your part for the planet. And I think what we have found is, sometimes I think of ESG is becoming JGB, just good business. Shareholders expect it. They see the weather events that have been happening. They want to know their investments are future-proofed, attracting the best and brightest talent. Young people are being clear. They want to work with purpose-driven companies. And it is true that customers are voting with their dollars as well to say, give me a sustainable option. So I think it comes together for progress.
Katie, no argument there. And again, I feel like these are the arguments that have been around for a couple of years, understanding that people want it, it makes good sense, it's good for the environment. Having said that, if you're a publicly held company, you got to also make sure that your shareholders are happy ultimately. Otherwise, it's going to be tricky. And I understand this idea of it's good business, but sometimes you've got to make a decision between a CapEx spend that's going to move the needle more when it comes to earnings versus doing the right thing. So how do we get around that?
It's a great point. And we actually have new research that we'll be releasing very soon here, a poll of 3,500 senior executives. And they are pointing exactly to a couple things. First of all, that sustainability is a top business priority. A third of them have made great progress against their commitments to reduce climate change. But they all are saying, look, we don't necessarily have the upfront capital, and we need partners to help us accelerate our progress. I guess the bright side of the downside, that buildings are 40% of global greenhouse gas emissions, is that when we make those buildings more efficient, those interventions cash flow, to the extent that companies like Johnson Controls now offer net zero as a service. We'll pay all that upfront capital because we know we'll see a return in the incredible savings on the back end. So that is something that is very important. It's a solution that people need, because in these days where you're worried about, are we going to have a recession or not? Every dollar needs to go to the purpose of that business. And this can help when you embrace decarbonization in a smart way.
And Katie, we only have about 25 seconds here, but as Carol mentioned, a lot of companies and a lot of leaders will talk, but will they actually make action happen? What is going to happen this week, and what actually can we take away from a meeting of leaders?
Again, really quickly.
Yeah, there'll be some tough things like writing the check to enable developing countries to grow in a more sustainable way. And that'll be tough to reach agreement, but I think we're going to see great progress on energy efficiency, on renewable energy, and in understanding that we can grow the world's economy even as we cut global greenhouse gas emissions. And that's the imperative for us to do right now and fast.
All right, we'll certainly be looking for some headlines out of COP28 later on this week. Katie McGinty, VP and Chief Sustainability Officer at Johnson Controls, on Zoom from Milwaukee.